Everyone, we're just waiting, giving 2 more minutes before we kick off. People still joining.
Okay.
Oh. Okay, I think we can start. We have only 1 hour and really a lot to cover, so I'll start on the dot, if that's okay. And this is being recorded, so people can watch after as well. So good morning, afternoon, everyone. Maybe even good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Paula Habakov, and I'm a policy manager at Access Partnership. And for those who don't know who we are a tech policy firm. And we like to describe ourselves and our purpose as leading countries to fair tech, which basically means partnering with governments and multilateral organizations and the private sector to ensure that countries have enabling frameworks and policies to allow for innovation to spur and for people to have access to technology without harming innovation or consumer options. So first of all, I'd like to, on behalf of AP, thank our great panel of amazing women that are actually leading and shaping the FinTech sector in Latin America. So thank you again for accepting our invitation. And like I just said, we have only 1 hour, and I do say this a lot, but time goes by in a snap. So I'll be very brief. I just wanted to highlight that on top of having this panel discussion and learning from these amazing women, their experience in the FinTech sector, we would like to take this event as an opportunity to launch the paper that Access Partnership has just recently published, which is called 5 Strategies for De-risking FinTech and Digital Payments in Latin America. So just as a quick background, the idea of the paper came because we are witnessing, or we have been witnessing for a long time, for some years now, a significant growth in the digital financial market in LATAM. And there is still a strong demand for these services in general, and companies have been entering the market and introducing different services and different payment options. However, we do know that entering and, more importantly, surviving the Latin American business landscape and regulatory environment doesn't come without its challenges. So mindful of that, and with the aim of addressing some of those barriers, we wrote this paper, which provides some insights and practical strategies or tips for new players entering the FinTech industry in LATAM. So just to briefly summarize the key takeaways from our research, I will now pass the floor to my colleague, Melissa Gonzalez, who will present the highlights of our findings. So Mel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paula. And yes, as you've mentioned, this is a really interesting event, and in Latin America, a huge opportunity for new market players. So just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Melissa Gonzalez. I'm a policy analyst at Access Partnership. And I'm really excited about this event and the opportunity to launch our latest white paper, 5 strategies for de-risking FinTech and digital payments in Latin America. As you may be aware, the digital payment sector in Latin America has experienced immense growth in the last decade. So just to put this into context, over the past 5 years, the number of FinTech startups in the region has more than doubled. This growth in demand for alternative payment methods has led companies to expand their service offerings and introducing new credit and debit cards, digital wallets, digital currencies, and more. However, this rapid growth has come with its fair share of challenges. So in this white paper, we have identified 4 key challenges that new market players face when entering this unique business landscape. First, increased competition in the sector, both from traditional financial institutions and other digital financial services. Second, tricky regulatory frameworks that create an uneven playing field and also make it difficult to navigate the landscape. Third, weak interoperability that leads to transaction friction and hinders cross-border payments. And lastly, cybersecurity risks that threaten consumer trust in digital payment systems. So, the idea behind this paper was to propose 5 strategies that can effectively overcome these challenges. The strategies are designed to provide actionable recommendations for companies as they navigate this business landscape and ensure that they thrive in these challenges. So some of the strategies include diversifying service portfolios to stay competitive and create added value, exploring collaborations with other financial institutions to break down bureaucratic barriers, building a strong collaborative channel with the public sector to ensure representation, adopting open APIs to allow easy integration with other digital payment services, and developing awareness campaigns to build consumer trust. So in this webinar, our expert panelists, composed of industry leaders and business experts with extensive experience in the digital space, will walk you through these strategies and provide valuable insights for companies looking to enter and survive the Latin American market. So if you're interested and for more in-depth insights, you can find our white paper on Access Partnerships website. So with this in mind, I hand it over to Paula, who will kick off this exciting panel discussion. And also I want to thank you all for joining and hope you enjoy this webinar.
Thank you, Mel. Yeah, like you said, for everyone who hasn't read the paper yet, maybe we can even drop the link in the chat. So feedback is always super welcome. If you disagree with something, have any follow-up comments, questions, we love this type of exchange, so please do reach out. And I forgot, but we have a chat as well, so and we're having a Q&A session at the end, so please drop your questions and we'll get to them at the end. So before we jump to our panel discussion, I just wanted to give the floor to our amazing women that are here today, so they can introduce themselves, because I think they will do a better job than me. So Paula, maybe you'd like to start.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you for the invitation. Such a pleasure to be sharing this panel with these great women today. So my name is Paula Regui. I'm Mercado Pago COO for Latin America. I'm based in Argentina, Buenos Aires, but I have a corporate role. So nowadays I look at the Latin America reality for the whole set of financial services that we are serving today, which basically covers payments, credits, investments, and insurance. So the whole picture in there. I joined Mercado Libre 23 years ago when it was just a dream in a garage. So lucky to be part of this whole evolution in our region and creating so much impact for thousands and millions of people that really needed to be integrated in this arena where many Latin Americans were excluded. So hope we can bring a lot of learnings and thoughts to this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Paula. I'm sure you can. It's 20 years ahead of this, so well done. Thank you. Julia, maybe you want to go second?
Yes, sure. So again, I'm not going to be repetitive. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm super happy being here today with these amazing women, even more so because it's only women, which is rare. So I'm happy to be here. I've been for around 5 years at Itaú BBA in the investment banking department. I'm responsible for the coverage of venture capital funds and growth funds globally. Before Itaú, I spent a couple of years at Stone, and before Stone, around 5 years at Gávea Investimentos.
Thank you, Julia. I have a, I'll spare you from that, but I have funny story with Julia that I might tell everyone later how we know each other. So, Mariana, do you wanna go after?
Thank you, Paula. And also, like my colleagues here, I'm super glad of being in a panel with only women in finance, which is rare. So that's really exciting to me to start seeing this type of panels arise, which is super helpful for everyone. And I'm currently working at NU Mexico, and I'm responsible for the main relationship with regulators and policy, the policy part of what we do here in Mexico. So I'm super glad of talking about news experience in this realm and how has it been with regulation here in Mexico.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mariana. It's a pleasure to have you here. Giovanna.
Hello, everyone. I am also so delighted to be here today, sharing the panel with you. My name is Giovanna Novis, and I am a legal counsel at Revolut Brazil. Before that, I worked with litigation at leading law firms in Brazil. I joined Revolut a year ago in time to really be a part of the structuring of the operation. And a really brief introduction about my point of view today. For those who don't know, Revolut is a FinTech, one app, all things money. And it was founded in 2015, and it's headquartered in London. In 2021, we hired the first person in Brazil, and now we're operating, and hopefully we'll be the first country of many in Latin America. Thank you.
Amazing, Giovanna. Thank you so much. That's how we met as well, when you guys were announcing the launch in Brazil now 2 months ago, not even.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So again, I'm repeating myself, but it's a real pleasure to have all of you with us. And now on to our panel discussion finally. So to kick off, I just like to ask some introductory questions to our speakers. And since, Giovanna, we were talking about that, maybe I'd like to start with you and say that Revolut has actually just recently begun its operations in Brazil, like you said, and they have chosen Brazil as their entry point, with other countries to follow, if I'm not mistaken, Mexico very soon. And since you've got your first-hand experience working in obtaining all the license, everything you need from a regulatory perspective, could you give us some insights into the main regulatory challenges that Revolut is dealing or have dealt in the Brazilian market?
Sure. Besides getting our first license, going more specifically in like some challenges that I can mention, coming up with the technological integration to comply with regulatory requirements of the central bank is always considering data protection laws is a key challenge, because there are many reports that we need to deliver and they're based internationally. So the challenge is precisely on how to integrate Revolut Brazil's operation with foreign systems, so we can guarantee that we will be able to deliver all reports correctly and within the legal time frame. Another challenge that I could mention is to bring the entire corporate governance to Brazil, filling the regulatory gap. So we have to commit to really internationalize what we already have on a global level to fulfill the local requirements, and to really propose a corporate governance that works for us and for our headquarters in the UK. Yeah, there is also the ESG policy that we have to create. Being a fintech, since we don't have this environmental footprint, it gives us the opportunity to tackle with more sensitive matters such as the social and governance, transparency, which not only the regulator wants to see as a mandatory requirement, but the customers, the people, and the employees are also looking for making us accountable in nowadays. So that's another challenge to this beginning of operations.
Thank you, Joanna. I can't imagine how many how many headaches we must have had in this beginning. So Mariana, also Nu has just recently obtained their regulatory approval from the Comisión Nacional Bancaria y de Valores to launch your first digital saving account and debit card in Mexico. But let's dive deeper into the nitty-gritty if we can. So could you give us some insights into the main regulatory challenges that digital finance companies face when they're kickstarting operations in Mexico?
Of course. Well, to start off, I would just like to say that fighting complexity in financial products, it's a global goal for Nu, and different territories pose different challenges. For this, Mexico is a great opportunity because the Mexican financial system is less developed regarding financial inclusion than how it was in Brazil. For instance, now only 1 in 4 Mexicans have ever performed a digital payment, or less than half of Mexicans have actually a savings account, or 11% of Mexicans have a credit card from a financial institution. So there is room for improvement. There's room for making people's lives better. And like what we have seen is that the rhythm of adoption of regulation is not the one that digital finance companies need to actually provide those types of services for people. Now we have 3 million customers in Mexico, a little bit more than 3 million. And we just recently launched our accounting, like our savings account. And in less than a month, we already had 1 million customers. So it's like people want it. There is room for demand. What is happening is that innovation is taking place in different types of institutional figures. Here in Mexico, the debate has centered in the FinTech law. And one of the challenges that the Mexican financial sector has is to actually democratize the discussion regarding the providing of financial services, because it's not only FinTech companies that are providing those services. It's different type of institutions that are just covering that gap that has been historically neglected by traditional financial institutions. And for instance, here in Mexico, Nu is not a FinTech because we don't have that license, because that license is actually very limited. Like what the regulation states here in Mexico that a FinTech company can or cannot do, it's really limited. So the idea is try to push for a multi-sector, for a cross-cutting reform agenda focused on trying to develop more channels and develop and boost financial inclusion from digital media and remote channels in order to try to bring like holistic financial inclusion to those sectors that have been traditionally neglected by traditional financial institutions.
Amazing, Mariana. Seems like there's a lot of work to be done, but you guys are starting. So Paula, in terms of regulatory frameworks, and you have a good broad understanding overview of what they look like, what improvements or changes would you like to see in Latin American countries to create a better level playing field for digital payment companies that are just starting or trying to enter the market?
Well, let me just provide a very small introduction before going to the improvements. If you look at Latin America, perhaps at different stages or moments in time, but the trends that we've seen on top of regulation has been exactly the same. So in the beginning, let's say 15 years ago, we've seen in Latin America a region really dominated by cash and really dominated by very few players in the industry serving financial services, not for everyone. So that was Latin America reality. So some fintechs, alternative and digital banks started to arise. And I think that the first regulatory wave was the one that brought this leveling the field for many type of players to coexist. So here are the fintechs, here are the traditional banks. Now you both exist, now you have to compete. That was basically the first movement in which fintech started to have, let's say, rights and also responsibilities, but they existed. The second wave was much more regarding interoperability and instant payments. I think Pix in Brazil is the greatest example that we can bring to the table. So now fintechs and traditional banks or incumbents not only coexist, but they have to interact. And they are all using the same rails. And that was very, very important to make like the industry bigger and much more productive. And I think the third wave is much more regarding open finance and how it's not only about interaction, but how now the data that belongs to the user and not to the institution can bring an upgrade in the type of services and the quality of the products that we will now bring to our users, because now the user will decide which is the interface that he will choose for their daily payments, for managing services that perhaps belong to other financial institutions in an interface that is not from that institution specifically. So existence, instant payments, and interoperability, open finance, I think is the trend that we've been seeing in the last 10 years in the region. Regarding opportunities, I think especially for the second wave, we talked a lot about interoperability and about instant payments. But what arose on top of that second wave was the need of having payments infrastructure in a good place before talking about interoperability. If you do not have the right rails, the right connections, the right incentives, it's a good regulation coming in place, but then when you want to take that into, let's say, practical behaviors and users' behavior, it won't work. Companies won't be able to interact in a good mode. Payments will last, let's say, forever. You cannot wait like 10 seconds to pay a QR code payment if you are waiting for your hamburger at McDonald's. So you need the infrastructure to be in place. And that's something that, once again, Brazil did very, very good, because the regulator came in, said, these are my rails, these are the standards, these are the credentials. I'm going to be the guardian of all the system going on. We did not see that happen, for example, in Mexico with CODI or in Argentina with Transferencias 3.0. A lot to talk about interoperability and the prices and the way in which interoperability was thought in different countries. So we can talk about that later. And regarding the third way, which is open finance, we are not seeing many regulators moving in there yet. They are announcing open finance as part of the regulations, but it's not there yet. It is in Brazil, but once again, it's not getting as much traction as we've seen with instant payments. And I know that is because it's much more difficult and it will take a longer time to see the good results on top of open finance. But regarding the opportunities, specifically, what we've seen on top of open finance is, once again, regarding user interface. If we are seeing different type of products, the seek of principality that we will look for our users to get in our interface, we cannot have a regulation and a user experience where navigating these different type of financial services that many times are regulated by different entities or with different type of licenses, the user has to feel the pain of moving from one screen to the other. So user interface for me is a huge opportunity that not many regulators in the region has really taken into account. And I believe that we have a huge opportunity of moving forward, not just with data sharing and not just with payment initiation, but with user experience as part of open finance.
Wow, that's a class, Paula. Thank you so much. It's a lecture. It's amazing. So now, Julia, to you, I'd like to ask, and I know you come less from a legal regulatory side, but more from a economic and business lenses, let's say. But when it comes to Latin America, we know that there is a diverse market landscape, and that each country has its own very unique characteristics and consumer preferences. So how can digital payment companies that they're starting out and entering markets in LATAM tackle this diversity and actually customize their offerings to meet the specific demands and needs of these various Latin American markets?
I think that it's opportunity, right? So here in the call, we have myself, I'm from a traditional bank, then we have Revolut and Mercado Pago. And so in essence, this is proving that the region is very pro innovation when we talk about payments and financial regulation, as Paula was mentioning. One important thing that I see is that we should, and Latin America in general, we should be proud of what we've developed on the payments front. I think that we are much more advanced, even when compared to the US. As Paula was mentioning, when we look at peaks, we are being the inspiration, right, for FedNow and for several other countries. So this shows that there is first opportunity, and second, from a regulatory standpoint, a willingness of the entities to foster competition and to in a certain way be an incentive for new entrants, which I think is very positive for the industry. That's what fosters innovation. So talking about specifically the consumer needs, I think that we have to a certain extent particular needs, but when we look globally, there are some similarities with other countries. So I think that several things can be adapted. But it's not something that's completely new. Whereas when we look at, I don't know, Southeast Asia or something like that. So I think that we do have similar characteristics when we look at Europe or even the US as well. Again, we are more advanced, right, in a sense that peaks and open banking, and now I think, I don't know about you girls, but I'm seeing less and less of cash money, right, and more everything electronic. So I think that these are things that foster new entrants, and it makes a good environment for competition. And I think that just to wrap up, which I think it's a very important point, and here I'm talking about Latin America in general, we are super pro the use of mobile, and so we are mobile first, and we are prone to new technologies. So when specifically about Brazil, I don't know the number for the other regions, I'm sorry, but in Brazil, we are like early adopters of all of the social media platforms. And so this means that everyone regardless of your social class, of course, with some exceptions, you have access to a mobile, right? And this is very crucial in payments and in fintechs because it can be doable by an app, right? So to a certain extent, the fact that we are technological and mobile first also helps us with financial inclusion. So I think that these are a couple of points to your question.
Thank you, Julia. I agree. Yeah, being a Brazilian, I say we like everything that's new, and we're the first one to get onto. Okay, so maybe going more. Now we had to kind of lay the ground for some of the strategies that Mel was talking about when we wrote the paper. So as digital payment companies, they are disrupting traditional financial services and reshaping the way transactions are actually being conducted. This means as well that since they are reshaping everything, they also face a lot of risks and a lot of challenges. There are some of them very unique to the region, as we've been saying. So I'd like to dive a bit in and explore how these companies can navigate the up and downs, overcome some of those obstacles, and thrive in this very evolving and changing landscape. So, Mariana, you were talking about how you work very closely with regulators. And we see a lot, is not only in the fintech space as well, but engagement with regulators in each country is key to not only understand, of course, a framework and apply to every necessary the license you need to operate, but also to explain to regulators the private sector needs and help them create an enabling environment. So there is this constant exchange, and this is something very interesting to follow and to be part of. So I wanted to ask if you can tell us a bit more about this, about your work on the day-to-day, let's say, and in your opinion, how can collaboration between payment companies, specifically, like as we're talking about them now, and regulatory bodies help create a more enabling environment for innovation and growth?
Well, for us, it's more like finding the sweet spot between the goals of both. And when it comes to digital finance companies, it's actually about bringing financial inclusion for everyone and not only access. Like we always say that digital finance companies and the government sometimes talk about financial inclusion and sometimes tend to confuse it with the sole idea of the access to this financial services. But financial inclusion is way more than that. It's about access, it's about use of those products, it's about consumer protection most of all, and also like providing financial literacy. So like to ensure that citizens actually have access to beneficial financial services, it's something that works both ways. It's on us as digital finance companies to bring that innovation, but it's also on regulators to try to adopt that innovation and try to put it in a framework that works for both sides. So digital finance companies have proven to be like a key tool to promote this holistic financial well-being through providing this financial products that actually change people's lives. And these digital finance sectors are the ones serving those other sectors that traditional financial institutions had been neglecting historically. So to actually boost and keep doing this work and keep reaching all those people that no one has had reached before, it is super important to work hand in hand with regulators and the industry as a whole to try to make regulation adapt to the trends. As Julia was saying, like people want it, people are adopting it, people are asking for it. However, regulation sometimes stays behind, but we also have to like push regulators to try to show them how it works, what we're doing, how we are improving people's lives. It's like very important to say these things. For instance, here in Mexico, Nu has been able to reach 80% of those municipalities that are tagged by the government as priorities, which means it's like rural populations with no branches, like those people out of those products to bring well-being to people's lives. So that's where we are right now.
Sorry. Perfect. Thank you so much, Mariana. Giovanna, so a bit on from, I guess you're saying what Mariana is saying, but from more Brazil perspective. But from your experience obtaining the relevant authorizations that you guys had to obtain to operate and other license, would you say that there is a lack of adequate regulations for digital finance service? And maybe you challenge me and say that no, we have the right ones, and I'll be happy with that. But if we do have, we still have a lack of enabling regulations that enable the new players to entry. To what extent this impacts the consumer experience and trust in digital payment solutions?
So it's a yes or no, spoiler. In relation to the license request that we asked, that we submitted and we got, which was the Sociedade de Crédito Direto, we can translate maybe direct credit entity. I feel like the regulation is actually good enough. The bigger issue was the central bank strike that delayed the process, and also addressing some further questions that they had, which was, of course, something that we were expecting. But a comment that I do have about the regulatory lack of, innovation, I think, is the lack of integration between the licensing process and the setup process before the commercial registry. I think it would be great to have them a little bit more integrated somehow, so companies wouldn't have to go through the same questions again. We go through a very detailed process with the central bank, and then with the commercial registry, they ask the same questions. If they could maybe communicate a little bit better, things would move faster and we would have a less bureaucratic process. Now, the impact of the lack of regulations in relation to the customer, I think now I would look more with the hats of the TechCo. When we don't have a regulation in place, the company do have more of a playing field to create and innovate. It's a lot of what Mariana was telling us right now. We have this more, just opportunity to create the best possible solution for the users. But on the other hand, the difficulty, especially on my perspective for the legal team, is to work with what we do have to assess the risks involved. Whether it's making extensive and conservative interpretations of what we have during our regulatory framework assessment, and or hiring leading experts to assist us with the regulatory analysis to help create the best possible products with less, less time for the customers. It was what Paula was telling us in her talk, when she was saying that we should always strive for less time on onboarding. It should be easy for the user to navigate the system. It should be easy to use. And when we don't have a regulation in place, we have to create our own, but always taking into considerations any risks that we may face, and a regulation would come in place. But that's also an obligation that the innovators should take on to educate the regulator, to come close and explain how the product works, so that the legislators can draw with that in mind, so that the gaps are narrower or when it's regulated.
Thank you, Giovanna. So going on to a different another strategy that we also touched upon in our paper. Paula, I wanted to ask in terms of service diversification. We discussed how important it is to remain competitive, and the big question is, I suppose, is how crucial it is to truly grasp the specific needs and preferences of different customer segments, and when we are trying to expand service offerings in the digital payment market. And I think you mentioned a bit that, but what are the untapped potential in certain customer segments in Latin America that countries can still go into to diversify their offerings so they remain competitive in this space that there is demand, but it's also each time more players, right?
Yeah. Now, and we've seen a lot these two very different type of strategies. Some fintechs that started with focus in just one financial service, trying to go very deep and create huge impact, for example, in serving a digital account with a prepaid card. In other cases, we've seen companies just going after crypto as their main value prop. In other cases was credit offering. But I liked what Mariana said some minutes ago. We are talking about principality. We are talking about financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is not more about access. It's about usage. It's about habit. It's about frequency that you get in the user's daily life. So I think that there is a huge or a bigger chance of success if you are a platform serving the whole sweet spot of products that users may need. And why? It's not just because of the offering, it's because when you serve, for example, digital payments, then you will have a much bigger way in which you can know your user, know their preferences, track their spending. Once again, we come from a region in which cash was, or it even is, the king in many of the countries. So behind cash, you cannot know what the user has, which the income that he manages month after month is. So to reach to the main point of the flywheel that we see is the successful flywheel in Latin America, which is basically, I need to transform that cash into digital balance. I need to use that balance in different ways in which you can know me, because the big prize is the access to credit. And after you make that habit in payments and credit, then I can teach and I can learn the user how to invest the money while they're not using the money all through the month, or how to get an insurance to be prepared for a much more difficult situation, or get a health insurance, a life insurance, a cell phone insurance, if that's the way in which they want to protect not only themselves, their families, and their assets. You can do that if you're basically looking at and serving the whole parts of that flywheel. So it's not only the way to approach the user need, but I think it's the correct approach in which companies will be able to success in this new trend of looking after the principality and the usage and frequency of the users in their platform.
Amazing. Thank you, Paula. Again, a lecture, so thank you. Julia, I also like to know your opinion on this in terms of investment, lending, and insurance services. Which areas present like the most promising opportunities from what you see for diversification in Latin American digital service landscape?
I think that starting from the last, insurance is, we have a lot of startups like insurtechs trying to disrupt this market and trying to do something different. I don't think we've seen yet a winner, and I think that there's a lot of room to improve in this specific sector. Going to lending and investments, there are several really good companies doing a very good job on both scenarios, right? So I think that links to what Paula mentioned. Open banking makes the fact that your data is your data and not the financial institution's data, and this automatically leverages you to have a better offer and a more, I would say, personalized offer, either for investments or for lending. So I think that even though there are good companies already doing both as open banking, and I hope it does expands in the region, you're going to have even more opportunity, because it's going to be common practice looking at credit or looking at investments in other institutions rather than your number one bank, for example, that you maintain, like your payroll or something like that. So I think that there's still a lot of room to grow, and I think that there's an interesting movement in I think that in Latin America, and I can speak more about Brazil, unfortunately, but I think that there's been an expansion in financial education, and this is being brought by these new players that are coming and being incentivized by the traditional players. So it's actually like a dual thing that's really beneficial for the country. When you have offers that you can invest like R$1, the everyone can invest, right? In a sense. So the person wants to educate on what would be that type of investment. And if you look at recent numbers, still the majority of the population let their money in the poupança, right? I don't know how to translate the word. I forgot. Anyways, with that said, I think that credit and investments, there's still a lot of room to grow, even though there are very good players. All of them are here in the call. But insurance, I think that there's still developments to be seen.
Amazing. Well, that's an untapped market then. Mariana, so we were talking about this as well when we first spoke. So how do you see like how people need for different products in your experience anew in Mexico shape the diversification strategies of new in Brazil or Mexico or elsewhere?
Well, I think the needs are very general regarding what a human being needs from a financial service or a financial product. So I want to combine two answers. One of the answers, like one of the questions from the public was, how do we companies can address the issue of financial education? So for us, that issue is in the core. So if you do not provide the tools for the people to actually make a good use of their own product, you cannot, like, the product will not succeed and the person will not succeed. So in the core of the product, at least from Nu, it's financial education. Like our products has it in its core. For instance, the savings account that we have has this like box that it's called cajitas in Spanish. So the yield is paid in the cajita, which is that money that it's away from the debit, like normal balance, and people can see how the yield grows. It's like their money every day, so they can make sure that their money is not only safe, but it's also growing every day. So that's how we, with the product, incentivize the idea of savings and the idea that it is okay and that it is worth it to actually have money in that savings account. So that's just one of the examples of how we companies can address the issue of financial education within the product and what we offer. So trying to answer the question of how are we seeing the people, like what people need, and how do they express the need for different products and services within the same environment, to say it in a way. It's like the idea of fighting complexity comes actually with that embedded in our mind. If we are fighting complexity, we are providing services that are easy to access, transparent, and available almost immediately. So that's the idea. We are seeing a trend in which Mexicans that are actually adopting this type of digital tools, which, as we know, in Mexico, cash is king. So we are still trying to make the adoption the best, one of the most important tasks that we have ahead, and Nu is actually being very successful in that task. We are seeing that people needs change every day, and they are changing rapidly, and they are changing more and more. So what we are trying to give is products that actually accompany people's lives in a very holistic way. And that's like a very clear trend that we're seeing. People want holistic experiences, single place, multi product offering, and that's what people are needing. So that's how we companies are trying to adapt to those trends and be the ones that are providing those types of experiences to the customer. Because as Paula was saying, it's not only about providing the products and just like putting them out there for them. It's trying to make the products work within each other, and like that actually change people's lives.
That's very true. And speaking as a user, actually, like I have a bank, a new bank, let's say here in London, and I saw this, like I have a saving account where you actually see growing every day. It can be like cents, but you like just knowing that the money is growing for you, working for you, it gives you this incentive to leave your money there. So absolutely, completely agree with what you just said. And we don't have that much time. I don't know if we're gonna be able to ask all the questions that I had in mind, because we wanted also to provide some space for the Q&A. But Paula, I wanted to ask you another question. So we know Mercado Pago now operates in multiple countries, and this is we kind of going from the diversification to partnering, and so we wanted to know, like, how can companies and Mercado Pago collaborate with other players, either incumbents or new players, to leverage expertise and also best practices in providing this new cutting-edge technology in digital payment solutions?
Well, it is good to say that licenses are not free lunch. You, of course, have pros and cons, right? You can have a better time to market if you partner. On the other side, you can have like less scalability, or in some cases, a worse user experience. In some other cases, a worse business case because of costs. But the way in which we've approached this in very different countries was always by looking at the opportunity of partnering with other players and knowing that what we can bring to the table, each of us, putting those things together would be like a better thing than whatever we could do independently. So I can give you a case. When we launched the investment fund in Argentina, there were only 400,000 accounts historically in the country, because basically it was a product only conceived by wealth people having like huge amounts of money in an investment account. So we partnered with the local bank. We chose the partner that we believe was going to be able to scale at the rhythm and the account of a number of accounts that we would need to open, that will have the correct mindset of thinking this on behalf of a user perspective, not only in the commercial terms, but also the experience. And we created a product that in the last 3 years created over 7 million accounts in the country for people that not even had the chance in the past to have or thinking about having a remunerated account in their hands. You talked about how nice it is to see in London your money grow every month or every year. Imagine in a country where the inflation rate is above 100% a year. So people having that money at home is basically losing money every day of the year. So that's the type of things where we really had to think about, can we do this alone? Can we do this better with a partner? And it was definitely a front in which we decided to go with a partner that had like the same mindset and willingness to impact as big as the one that we had. But we have plenty of examples. When we created the utilities payments and the utilities payment networks, we became, let's say, the digital most relevant partner of a network that today collects utility payments in physical world. So why not? Let's become their digital cashier for all the users across the whole country. We launched credits in Brazil, partnered with a local bank until we had our own license. So we always see these as opportunities. We know that in many cases, industry is much more polarized between enemies, friends, in some cases, nemies. We like to say that we are friend-miss. So that's a little bit of competition, but a lot of opportunity of doing things together as an industry. And once again, when bringing things together to the final users, what we can combine and do better as two companies operating with the same symphony is, at the end of the day, best products for the final clients.
Perfect, Bella. That's very cool. We really don't have that much time, but I think we wouldn't want to leave one topic behind, because we mentioned it, and I think it's a key one, which is using APIs to achieve interoperability and all the digital open banking and open finance initiatives. So Julia spoke about it, Paula did too, Mariana also mentioned, I think, but I would like to just expand a bit more on it. So Brazil is in the process, like Paula said, we're implementing open finance. There's still a lot to be done, but we have done a lot as well. So I wanted to ask Julia, and I'm sure this is something that you see a lot, and I know you even wrote a piece on it, but how can digital payments companies leverage open banking frameworks to enhance their product offerings, especially those companies they're entering now the market, and improve customer experiences and drive innovation?
Yeah, I'm going to be brief since we have just a couple of minutes left. But as I had mentioned before, open banking opens a new horizon, right? In a sense that when adopted and when the end consumer wants to share their own data, it opens a lot of possibilities of new products and new services. And I think that's something that's really important to point out, since we have like a global audience, is that Pix is not open banking. It's like two completely different things. So while we have seen a lot of success in Pix, I think that open banking is taking longer than it should to be being spread out in the country. And I think that the main reason for that is education again. So as I mentioned, financial education. So how can you expect that the entire population will understand what open banking is when the term starts in English, right? So we have a lot of boundaries and a lot of steps to make it completely wide open. But again, I think that it has a lot of opportunity, and a lot of financial institutions and fintechs are trying to help on this educational piece. But I think it's very crucial to then make it open for the entire population, and again, everyone can benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, talking from a user perspective here in the UK, we have open banking as well. And I see in mine when I open mobile app, and you see that you can share your data with other companies. But as a user, it's very hard to understand, okay, what do I gain from that? So I think even here, it seems like there is some more effort in explaining the benefits of it to the users, because we do have to press, we do have to give our consent. It does give it has some time involved, and if we don't necessarily understand what the benefits are, maybe we won't, I don't know, it would be a hassle. So I understand that, Julia, and thank you very much for your insights. I think we are exactly on the hour, and sadly I didn't get many of the questions from the audience, but please, if you want, just write to us, and then we can get back to you with questions that you have. I'll get in contact with the speakers. So feel free to reach out with questions as well. And I've been told to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So please do if you haven't yet. And yeah, I think so. That's a wrap. It was very quick, but it was short and sweet. And I would like to thank our speakers for their participation again and again and again, and for everyone who has joined us today. It's again a pleasure to have a women-only panel, and not only women, people who are actually leading and shaping the market. So thank you very much for being here, for accepting the invitation, and for everyone who hasn't read our paper, please do, and do get in touch as well with any comments that you may have. So thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, and we'll speak very soon.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.